Before we begin, I want to thank you for being here. You might notice that I speak with an accent. English isn't my first language. I hope that detail won't distract you, but instead remind you that stories, like people, come from all over the world. Welcome back to Dark Lens Documentary. Today, we take you deep into the dark heart of Victorian England. Not through the halls of wealth and nobility, but through the narrow, choking alleys where survival itself was a miracle. In the late 1800s, Britain stood proud as the richest empire on earth. But behind the polished glass of its elite homes and grand palaces, a very different world exists. One few dare to see and fewer still live to describe. Welcome to Victorian Slums. By the end of the 19th century, nearly 1 in 3 Londoners lived in poverty. That's not static. That's a silent crowd of children begging in the fog, mothers coughing in the dump rooms, and men broken by brutal labor. When Henry Mayhew, a journalist and social reformer, first walked into these slums, even he was shaken. He described the ground as sleek with grease and filth, the water blackened, and air reeking like a graveyard's breath. Garbage piled along the alleyways, disease lingered like a fog you could never shake. And yet, this was everyday life. They weren't occasional tragedies here, they were neighbors. Children would fall sick and vanish. Parents would dig shallow graves, then carry on, because the world gave them no choice. Between 1800 and 1850s, England's population doubled, sending waves of people into London in search of work and unknowingly into the arms of misery. As the city swelled, entrepreneurs saw a dark opportunity. They built homes for desperate. Ramshackle tenements and decaying warehouses converted into lodging. These places were often unheated, unfested, and shared by dozens. If you were poor in Victorian London, your home might be a dump cellar, crawling with lice, with a cracked pump outside for water that everyone else also used, and toilets just a hole out back, shared by families, strangers, and rats alike. Stoves were a luxury, so what did the poor eat? Cold bread, hard cheese, potatoes if they were lucky. Hot meals were rare. Nourishment was even rarer. And death was constant, especially for children. Orphans slept in doorways or curled up in basements, pressed beside criminals, rats, or even open swears. They were unwashed, unseen, and mostly unloved. No toys, no warmth, no future. And yet, this suffering was mocked or ignored by those in power. One magistrate called the slums pits of drunkenness, filth, and crime, as if the poor had created their own despair. Newspapers treat the slums like grotesque exhibits, and the rich began taking nighttime slumming tours, dressing in disguise to gawk at the misery of masses. Some even paid to stay in dust houses, the era's version of slums hotels, for a night of grim entertainment. There were nearly thousands of them by the late 1800s. These were old warehouses or basements where the poor could buy a night of rest, if you can call it that, for just few pennies. The cheapest beds were called 4-penny coffins, litter of wooden boxes you'd lie in. By morning, everyone was kicked out. No warmth, no belongings, just the streets again. Even the Thames River became a matter of despair. In some slum districts, collecting suicide victims from its waters became a full-time job. Children with nowhere else to go played in the alleys, their games made up from broken sticks, trash, and scraps. Laughter was rare and joy even rarer. But eventually, something began to shift. Charles Booth, a reformer, created a now famous poverty map, coloring London's streets by wealth and revealing just how vast the suffering really was. His work inspired change. Sanitation systems, new schools, charity housing projects, flickers of light in the long darkness. Philanthropists began building schools, hoping to change a generation through education. But for many, especially those already buried in unmarked graves, help had come too late. So today, through these haunting photographs and forgotten memories, we bring you not just a story lesson, but a reminder that behind the empire's greatness was a hidden city, filled with souls who suffered in silence. Their stories are no longer forgotten. This is Darkland Documentary, and these are the shadows we remember. If this story moved you, consider subscribing. There are more truths buried in time, and together we'll keep uncovering them.